You're looking good, and it feels good to be with you today. I'm Kendall Brian Hunter, and this is the Eyes of Faith podcast, where I talk about news, events, life with the eyes of faith. Now, for some decades, I have been itching to write this book called Life, some pointers, Life, some pointers, and it was aimed at teens, preteens, junior high level, that type of demographic. We're just talk about things I've learned in life. Sort of a guidepost to life type of book. At a certain edge, you need to become a mentor. People get stuck in a rut. You meet people who still think that they're 18 years old and they're 53. 53 maybe think they're 5 years old. But no, this is a way to lead people into adulthood. I had a bit of an interesting experience. I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they have a very good success model. So you strip away the theology, just take the principles. It's a very good model. For example, when I was 21 years old, I served a mission from 19 to 21, served a mission for my church. So when I got off my mission, I served in Portugal, so I had 2 years public speaking in a foreign language. Learning another language, getting an education, living healthy, getting married, having a large family. You're Asian, you're Jew, you're black, you're white. You follow those principles, and that's the key to success in life. So I'm going to talk about that later on at the end of this podcast. But first, as always, we're going to have to deal with the news. So the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has a new prophet, and I think this is the second lawyer. The first one was Howard W. Hunter. It's interesting, leading councils of the church, we have three former university presidents, Dallin H. Oaks, in addition to Dallin H. Oaks, Jeffrey R. Holland, who is actually the successor to Dallin H. Oaks, president of Brigham Young University. President Eyring was president of Ricks College. David A. Bednar transitioned Ricks College to BYU, Idaho. What does that mean? Don't know, but it's interesting. Dallin H. Oaks had experience in the Philippines. And I'd like to talk about this. There's a good spread on President Oaks, pictures from his family. Part of that, when he's talking, he appears very formal, direct. Doesn't do a lot of horsing around. But from personal experience, he's really pleasant and very laid back. He has a pulpit presence and he has a personal presence. And just show him hanging out with his family, with one of his granddaughters, Julie Ward. I lived in the same ward with one of his granddaughters, so I got to know her a little bit. And President Oaks, he's a real thing. I'd like to talk about something. Like I said, this is under the theme of life, some pointers. One of the things I'm going to talk about is this book. I'm going to set the stack of stuff aside. This is very low key. I don't do a theme song. I don't do bobbleheads. There's your bobblehead. I'm going to set that aside. No theme song. I try and make this reverent without being uptight. So there's this article in the Harvard Business Review called Managing Oneself. And if you scour the internet, you can find a copy of this. The licenses, I can print out one copy for my personal use, and this is my one copy. But what he talks about, Peter Drucker, is that people operate differently. Some people are listeners, some people are readers, some people are talkers. And when you're working with a leader, one of the tips I could give you, one of the pointers I could give you is that understand how your leader processes things, reading, listening, or talking. Because here's another key to life. People are different. When you get called into a presidency or you join a church, when you're volunteering for something, you have to pay attention. Okay, how is this person different from me? Brigham Young said, this is in Discourses of Brigham Young, page 254, said Brother Brigham, understand men and women as they are and not understand them as you are. Understand men and women as they are and not understand them as you are. Understand the other person's framework, and that's a pointer for life. Dallin H. Oaks is a slow decision maker. President Ezra Taft Benson and Russell M. Nelson make decisions quickly. As President Oakes pointed, Russell M. Nelson's a doctor, and doctors train themselves to make very quick decisions with incomplete or imperfect information. Think of a doctor in the ER. Within 1.5 minutes, they're deciding, okay, we need to amputate this leg. You have to make this life-changing decision. Then you have to communicate it with love. But an ER doctor has to say, okay, the wound is so severe, we're going to have to cut off this foot. And doctors make those quick decisions. And you sort of have to, when you're on the other end of the amputation, you have to squirm, but you realize it's the best medical decision. Thomas S. Monson and Alan H. Oakes are very slow decision makers, very thorough, and you need charts and whatnot, and talking with people, make sure everyone's on board. Well, which one's the right leadership position? Well, both have strengths and weaknesses. Both have strengths and weaknesses, so you pay attention. And that's the question about leading and teaching. That once you understand that people are different and you need to work within their differences, that discussions on what's a good leader, their principles, personalities, circumstances, but also the people they're leading. Same thing with teaching. There's a teacher, a reader, a listener, or a talker, and there's a pupil in the class, the student, a reader, a listener, or a talker. See, some of the teachers you get along with, you get to sync up between the readers with the readers, the talkers with the listeners with the talkers. That makes a good, and you see, that's why leadership gets so puzzling at times, is because you're assuming that people are the same. And once you go with the obvious statement that people are different, as Brigham Young pointed out, and you're working within those differences, it seems to become better. So like I said, when you attend a quorum meeting, or you get a new class, or you get a new job, keep a notebook of the type of differences. Take this as a pointer of how these people process things, and you'll become a more effective employee. Things will go further. Okay, here's the news. Donald Trump gave Charlie Kirk the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously, gave it to his wife. Growing up, we always thought it was people on the left that were getting killed. JFK, RFK, MLK. And now it's people on the right that are getting killed and getting lawfared, warfared, and smear-fared. Another thing about Donald Trump, you may have saw that Time magazine where it's sort of a bottom looking up, have a picture of Donald Trump, and they say, where's his hair? There's a pattern of body shaming Donald Trump. I tried to find this clip. I saw it, I think it may have been C-SPAN. Governor Schwarzenegger makes this a joke about a jack-o'-lantern. He makes a joke about his wife's, giving all this candy away. Hey, are you a liberal? Giving all this stuff away. Jack-o'-lantern round as Ted Kennedy and orange like Donald Trump. I couldn't find it. I wish I had, but this thing about Donald Trump's orangish complexion, is that body shaming? Does that feel like it's body shaming? If you do use it like a race, is that body shaming? What about Donald Trump's small hands? Is that body shaming him? Someone who is born with small hands is no different than a woman born with small breasts. How's that for a reframe? His hair. Now, his hair, it's a bit of a trademark. It's part of his branding. This is a long time ago. It was probably about 10 years ago. I was on a bus early in the morning, and it happened to be Halloween day. So that's actually fun. You want to have some fun, ride a bus on Halloween. The driver's in costume, people are in costume. You do it for about half an hour. You'll have some fun. But there's this gal dressed up as Donald Trump, and I wish I'd gotten a picture of it. But she had her hair was combed, just had all these bobby pins poked in it to make it look like Donald Trump's hair. And then the second most recent picture of Time magazine. Now, it's having a light effect. Now, first of all, as you age, your hair falls out. Are you taking notes? That's another life's pointer. At a certain point, you just go with the bald look. Now, you don't do a comb over like a Rudy Giuliani. You just give it and you do the bald look. And it looks good. But yeah, Donald Trump's losing his hair. So but it's the perspective. It's a bottom up, and there's sunlight behind it. So of course his hair, it's going to look like there's less of it because he has thin hair. This isn't like Absalom in the Bible where you just have a thick pile of hair. This has thin hair. And they're making fun of him losing his hair. Well, when you get older, once again, is that body shaming? Because when you get older, you lose your hair. Body shaming. And do you remember June 27th of 1994? We had that picture of O.J. Simpson with the intentionally darker cover. That more body shaming, skin shaming, colorism. Body shaming and colorism against O.J. Simpson. Body shaming and colorism against Donald Trump. Yeah, there's anti-white racism when we all know it. You know it if you've experienced it. Blue-eyed devil. Charlie Kirk. Who's going to replace him? He was a rising generation. He was the hope of the future. And like James Dean, cut off way too soon. Pray for his wife. Pray for his supporters, his organization. These organizations may it may go on. It may join with other organizations like the ALF-CIO. These organizations just aren't permanent. But there's a lot of momentum and energy right now. You've noticed with the Rush Limbaugh passing, before he was dying, he was showing his age. He was sort of the, an institution rather than an innovator. And he was showing his age. And so he had the rise of the other ones like Mark Levin, Sean, the people who guest hosted on the Rush Limbaugh program, Glenn Beck. They seem to take his place. But it's interesting. There's just not one central focus. And people were banking on it. In fact, Glenn Beck said that when he was going to retire. And, Glenn Beck sort of runs off at the mouth sometimes. He says things he doesn't intend. That's part of the branding. But he said he's thinking about handing off his empire to Charlie Kirk and just, give it to him. And that would have been a great asset. Charlie Kirk had the goods. He had the skills. He had the organizational skills. See, I don't have the organizational skills. I'm fine here sitting in my beige room wearing a beige shirt and talking to you directly. If I could reach through the cyberspace, maybe at some point in the future. And this works best for my temperament. Remember, like I said, the type of person I am, this works best. But he was able to do the organization and the interaction. So we'll be watching it, Freedom USA, what that happens. So these are at 12 minutes. Let's just shift gears and go into bullet point mode. For example, let's do this bullet point form. If you were wrong about Fetterman, raise your hand. I will. Here's another life pointer. This comes from How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you make a mistake, admit it. Okay, I admit I was wrong about Fetterman. He seems to be the voice of reason in the room. I would have liked to have Dr. Oz, but Fetterman, he's willing to see both sides of an issue, like like Bill Maher. Sorry, I'm a little bit raspy. I do 2 podcasts back to back. And I obviously do not have Orson Welles' voice. But son of a gun, it's psychologically healthy to admit that you're wrong when you're wrong. This is from Fox News. I'm the only Democrat in my family, says Fetterman. I grew up in a conservative part of Pennsylvania. I'd never compare anybody to Hitler and those things, Fetterman declared. Such extreme rhetoric will make it more likely that there will be extreme outcomes in political violence. Pay attention, it's the left being violent against the right, even though the right's allied with the NRA. That does not bar the left from owning guns. Charlie Kirk again. Speaking of Kirk, Fetterman said, let people grieve and give people the space. I'm not going to use that terrible thing to make my argument, try to to put out my views. It's like and then name of God in vain. He's a father that had his neck blown out by a bullet. We got to turn the temperature down. Justice Jackson SCOTUS. Don't know what I wrote there on that note. This is her quote. They're debating. Apparently, they had, in order to combat racism, they had some electoral areas, precincts that were weighted. If you have a 90% black and you get white people, there's something fishy going on. But they're redoing these districts. But the question is, okay, when do we stop this? When do we say we fix this as best as possible? So this is what Justice Jackson said. And my kind of paradigmatic example of this is something like the ADA. Congress passed the American with Disabilities Act against the backdrop of a world that was generally not accessible to people with disabilities, and so it was discriminatory in effect. She began. Congress said the facilities had to be made equally open to people with disabilities, if readily possible, I guess. I don't understand why that's what's not happening here. Then she made the connection between race and ability. The idea of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is that we respond to current day manifestations of past and present decisions that disadvantage minorities, and make it so they don't have equal access to the voting system, right? Jackson said they're disabled. So you have to allow that sometimes when the people are talking extemporaneously, they don't say things as clearly as if they had done 15 redrafts of it. And that's the hazard of the way I do things. As you know, so I'll just do things off the top of my head. And so it's not as elegant, as precise as I'd like. I have a job. This is something I wedge in on Saturdays and such. But my goodness, that sounded like Vice President Harris' word salad. This is a holdover from the Autopen presidency. I was going to make a comment about Judge Thomas Griffith, but there's nothing constructive that come from it. I notice that people on the left and right process language differently. Earlier, I did a podcast called Charlie Kirk and the Pink Elephant Effect, where I talk about this model. So, she's just processing language differently, but son of gun, blacks are disabled people. Immutable characteristic. She may be making a good point using a bad analogy. I'm glad there are other justices on the court. Moving on, Mandami in New York City. He advocated a plan to pay for all these freebies and how to pay for it. As always, if the solution is to tax the rich, always remember, markets adjust. You tax the rich, markets will adjust. E.L. Jacoby had this funny post. Mandamus said, I never said he's going to defund the police. And then Jacoby just has all these pictures where he said, I actually am going to defund the police. Those of us who are older, this should remind us of Bill Clinton, promising the moon, delivering a bunch of green cheese. But it's a little bit more than that. People knew Bill Clinton was lying to them. It's not so much they wanted it, but they went along with it. Once again, people are processing reality. You get caught up in the emotion, the energy of someone, and you do stupid stuff. Reason is a bit of a viceroy. It's that reason is your drill sergeant that keeps you grounded. Well, Pope Leo and His Royal Highness King Charles III are meeting together. They're praying in public, so I'm all for prayer. The devil teaches a man not to pray. And the Pope's giving the title Royal Confrater, the pronunciation Confrater, as you speak the French. It's interesting. First time in 500 years, and I'm glad they're talking to each other. So what the history is King Henry VIII had the Man for All Seasons ghostwrite a defense of the Seven Sacraments, so the Pope gave King Henry VIII the title of Defender of the Faith. And then he broke off, became Protestant, but they still kept the title. So, because the king is the head of the Church of England. There you go. And then, so that was sort of a funny burn, but now they're meeting and the Pope's giving the title Royal Confrater. I'm glad they're reconciling. We always, for people hanging out and being able to work, even though they do have legitimate differences. Because when you don't talk, you remember how the left always said we need to have a conversation. Once again, the left processes language differently than the right. Let's have a conversation. Charlie Kirk tried to have a conversation, and he got a bullet in the neck. Another thing to think about this is ecumenism. That's the idea where you're trying to get all the churches back together and believe the same thing. It's interesting because it affects Protestants. Because when you talk to Protestants, you always hit them up with the denomination question. That's what Joseph Smith had. Okay, I'm a Christian, but which denomination of Christianity? Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian. Is there something else? Why not Eastern Orthodox? And so there's a movement of trying to get all these churches together, the ecumenical movement. It's interesting. Hugh Nibley talked about it in his book, The World and the Prophets. I recommend reading. It's a dated book, but it's a classic. The World and the Prophets. It's funny. I got this email, and I honestly I thought it was a sort of a hacking, malware type emails, because it's like, this has been canceled, you owe money type thing. So, okay, here's another point. When you get an email that looks suspicious, and they give you a link, don't click on this to PayPal. Don't click on the link from the email. Go out, open up a new window. In fact, open up another browser, open up a new window, just to be safe. Go to PayPal, set up two-factor authentication, and I found that there's this out of court, or this lawsuit, class action lawsuit. So I got some money off of it. So here's another point. When you get money, you put it in savings, because Christmas is coming. Once you pay off your debt, just bias towards saving. That's another pointer for life. So ecumenism, Hugh Nibley in the world and the Prophets. Peter Crave wrote a book called Ecumenical Jihad. That's another book I recommend. Do interlibrary loan. What's going on in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Are we becoming ecumenical? Well, we're adding Protestant hymns. We're using Protestant verbiage, such as good news, brokenness, focus on born again. This last conference, I had this testimony at such and such a time, such and such a place. That's something in the late 60s, early 70s, where born agains would do that. I heard John MacArthur talk about that, and he said, well, and he made the point that it's funny, because I'd make the same point, is that, conversion's line upon line, precept upon precept. You may get a testimony, but getting a testimony is different from getting a conversion. And the conversion's line upon line, precept upon precept. So justification, sanctification, then you have deification. We're also celebrating Catholic derivative holidays with Palm Sunday and Passion Weeks, because there's a way that Catholics do it, and I saw that on my mission in Portugal. Then you have a Protestant watered-down version of it. You have the Eastern Orthodox version of it. For example, on Palm Sunday, palms don't grow in Russia, so they use pussy willow instead. And we had questions about ecumenism, the ecumenical movement. Should we be, in order to foster brotherhood, should we be singing Protestant hymns in general conference? My response is section 1 in 1 Nephi, chapter 14, verse 10. Chase. Here's a story. I just threw it in here. Separated twins, separated at birth, identical twins. In Korea and America, have found they have unusual differences in IQ. So you had two sisters. You understand, TV soap operas, bad episode of Star Trek, and Star Wars. You have twins separated at birth. The sister raised in the U.S. had an IQ 16 points lower than her sibling in Korea. 16 points lower. Previous studies revealed that identical twins typically have no more than a 7-point IQ difference, which difference making this case astounding. Differences in similarities in intellect, reasoning, values, and more were observed among the sisters. Intellect, reasoning, values, and more were observed among the sisters. So what does this mean? Here's another life pointer. There's something called a hasty generalization. This is just one case. It's a type of case that can take on a mythology of its own. You need to have more. You just don't generalize from one instance. One bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch, as Donny Osmond said. But it does make you think about the American school system. We don't actually have an American school system. Trump's, I don't know if he's done it yet, but dismantling the Department of Education, just the states can handle it. The federal government doesn't need to handle it. I went to public education, K-12. Then I went to a university, and son of a gun, I got better GPA at the university. And maybe because I was older, I was a returned missionary, I had better study skills. I was actually studying something I wanted, better quality of teachers. So there you go. Just don't fly off the handle with one astounding story. Understanding the left. Now, I did this earlier podcast where I talked about this model that I use. It's for understanding the left. There are three core drives are feelings, fairness, and friends. They base things on emotion, fairness, and distributive justice, and egalitarianism, and building community. And there's this article his name is by a rabbi named Daniel Lapin. It's called The Severed Flower. Now, I posted a link to it. It's from policyarchive.org. I think it was given to the Heritage Foundation. And where he talks about the some of the differences, and it's interesting because I read a version of this in his book called America's Real War, and it's one that got me thinking for this model. It's like, okay, if you're for the gun control, equal rights amendment, and abortion, if you're for one, you're for all. That's what Andy Rooney said. But why is there this correlation among those? Well, there's a coherent reason behind it. So read this talk called The Severed Flower, Conservatism Without Religion by Rabbi Daniel Lapin, Policy Archive. You can actually Google it on your own. 26 minutes into this. Now let's get to the life some pointers, this whole build-up. As you notice, my voice is going. This is water. I put some, like one of those candy mints in here to keep me going. But man, I'm going to have to rest after this. I'm just not long-winded, which you're probably grateful for. The first thing with life some pointers, the first thing I do is I'm a reader. When I turned 50 years old, I read an entire encyclopedia in under a year. That's a comparative advantage. People say, okay, what's your superpower? Comparative advantage is a better thing. What are you best at that you're better at than anyone else? Unique point of sale is another term. Gift of the spirit if you're religious. So let's talk about the success library. The first book in your success library are the scriptures. What are your faith? These are the scriptures my faith holds dear. Muslims are welcome. Not all Muslims are Wahhabis. Read the Quran. I'm reading the Quran for the fourth time. Now, I don't believe everything in there, but I want to give them a due hearing and treat the Muslims with respect to understand their point of view. Whatever if you're an atheist, read the Atheist Reader, Origin of Species, the Analects, the Buddhist writings, Tao Te Ching. Just find some of your religion. Connect with your religion. Don't lose that taproot to heaven. The taproot to the tree of life. Keep it. That's the foundation. Once you get there, once you get the spiritual side set in order, everything else falls into place. Now, what I recommend after that is the article I showed earlier called Managing Oneself. So track this down on the internet, and this talks about how to control yourself. What Stephen Covey calls be proactive. When you're showing initiative, taking charge of yourself, you need to understand something. It's not just mindless energy. That you understand, okay, who you are, how you learn, and what your contribution is to humanity, your comparative advantage. You don't have to use that term as like, what can I contribute? But the economic term, what's your comparative advantage? That's important for making your career choice. Start there. Start thinking about what you're good at, your comparative advantage. After that, I recommend this, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is the godfather of modern self-help books. You go to the used bookstore, find a copy of it in your library, digital copy. Read it, write it down, the 7 habits. I have a photograph of the diagram. I'm find if I can find the diagram there. Oh, I spent there for a second. Think about this diagram, how all the 7 habits interact: public victory, private victory, be proactive, begin with the end of mind, put first things first. Habit 4 is think win-win. Habit 5 is seek first understand, then be understood, then synergize. 7th habit is to sharpen the saw, renewal, studying wisdom literature. 7 habits, do you say? Look, there's an 8th habit also by Stephen Covey. Sorry, the book fell, so the edges a little bit. That's find your voice, inspire other people to find theirs. So get these 2 books, back to back, read them together, 7th habit and 8th habit. With all these writers, they tend to have more books than I show here. And if you take this as a lifelong process where you're reading all these books, once a year going through these books, this is manageable. So this is Seven Habits is more about life management, finding your purpose, your comparative advantage, and how to interact with people. The next one I recommend is The 10 Natural Laws of Successful Time and Life Management by Hiram W. Smith. This is the man who headed the old Franklin planners. It's a pen and paper planner that really ruled the roost for about 25, 30 years. So let's do it. He has these 10 laws, like the 7 habits. You write them down, and you understand how to manage your time. So this is what the Franklin Planner looks like. So on one side, on this side here, you have your to-do list. Then you have your daily schedule. And you have over here, this is the notes section. So you have your calendaring technical stuff. This is where you write notes. Now, there's a way to mimic this on your phone. So you have the create a box. So you have the calendar app, and then you have your notebook app, and you can mimic that on your phone because the phone is cyber backup. It's across platforms. But I actually went back. I like the paper one. Something that works for me. So I have the old binder. Day timer works as well. Some of the other, just whatever works for you. Make sure that you're managing your time properly and your life properly. The key to managing your life is managing your time. The last one is to go back to Drucker, and that's called The Effective Executive. This is one that Newt Gingrich recommended. And you'll see by this time things are getting a little bit repetitive because we're talking about the same principles about time and life management. This is more about how to be a leader. Let's see. So these are the books. Now there's some other books that I don't have hard copies with me. They're by Jim Collins, called Built to Last, Good to Great, and then Good to Great in the Social Sector. So Jim Collins, he's replaced Stephen Covey, who's passed on. And sorry. Try to do it without things following. So that's personal management. How do you influence people, interact with other people? So the classic How to Win Friends and Influence People. Newer editions have different covers, but it's all good. Write these down, the principles, and this is how to interact with people. You use with your coworkers. When you're at church, mosque, or synagogue, or whatever your transhumanist group is. I'm saying that kind of half joking, half serious. How to interact with people, how to influence people. Now, another one, there's books called Crucial Conversations, Crucial Accountability, and then Change Anything by the Vital Smarts Company. So I recommend those two as how to confront someone. The roommate who's not chipping in for toilet paper, the person who keeps showing up to work late. That's the thing about a household. Imagine if you're a nurse, and you always have a person who just keeps showing up to work late. That gets aggravating. So that's how to interact with yourself and with people. Now, of course, I always recommend my book. Buy a case of these and hand these out for Halloween. You'll feel good about yourself. Money management. There's time management and money management. A scarce resource with alternative uses. And people use it very well, and people use it very poorly. So if you want to get your money under control, I recommend this book called The Five Lessons a Millionaire Taught Me About Life and Wealth by Richard Paul Evans, the Christmas box guy. Yeah, he's rich, but how does he manage his money? 5 steps. I recommend this. If you can track down this is an old pamphlet you can track down on the internet called One for the Money by Marvin J. Ashton. This is also a good one. So after those books, I recommend The Richest Man in Babylon. This is the classic. Now, it's written a bit like a fable or a fairy tale. These ancient documents that Indiana Jones and Daniel Jackson dug up out of the desert and translated. It's fake, but it's effective. A bit like The Greatest Salesman in the World. But these are really good principles. Here, this is what you learn. The rules of acquisition, not the rules of acquisition of the Ferengi, but this is how to do that. Start thy purse to fattening, control thy expenditures, make thy gold multiply, guard thy treasures from loss, make of thy dwelling a profitable investment, ensure a future income, increase thy ability to earn. And they have the 5 laws of gold. I don't want to, they're in the book, so I don't want to spoil it to you. So the rules of acquisition and then 5 laws of gold. And lastly, anything put out by Dave Ramsey. I've heard his radio's program. He's really good about migrating to the internet now. These are the baby steps, and there's a sequence to it. You save $1,000 in emergency fund, pay off all your debt. Now, the second one, that's the most important step, because once you get out of debt, you start keeping your money. That's where you'll just be amazed how much money you have once you get out of debt. You save 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 months expenses and savings. And you start investing in a 401k and a pre-tax Roth thing, do your college funding. Then 6 is pay off your home early, so you can actually say you're debt free, but you still have debt on your home because it takes a while to pay off your home. Last thing is build wealth and give. And this is what I do is, first of all, this is from Richard Paul Evans. It has 2 things. It's a personal budget or a cash flow, and then the other one's a net worth. So net worth and a budget. So you do the budget at the beginning of the month and your net worth at the end of the month. I actually have it on a computer. There's apps that do it. I made my own spreadsheet a number of years ago, and it works for me. And so every time you get a paycheck, you have the budget and then do the net worth. That's one of Richard Paul Evans' rules, is you have to know how much money you have, where it comes from, where it's going, and what it's doing. When you're a little kid, you have your checkbook and savings account. When you're old, you have a 401k, you have bonds, you have your personal stock portfolio. That's just a little bit harder to manage. It's able to get on top of things, to get on tabs of your money, make sure that you have a good handle of it. Money does not disappear unless you have a flexible spending account. You spend it, and the idea is to maximize how much interest you're collecting. Here's another budget, a print budget from Dave Ramsey's book called The Total Money Makeover. Get it at your library. If you like it, then check it out. This is another budget. Really what you do is, this is what I found helpful, is for doing a budget, is you get an envelope and you just save all your receipts. You stick them in an envelope after 2 weeks or maybe a month, and you just pay attention to how much you spend on it. So here, this is a envelope. This is from the Epic Times. But you see I have these receipts in there, and I'm able to see where I spent my money, and am I using my money wisely? There's ways I can save my money. For example, when I was in college, I was meeting at a university at BYU, and we're in the Tanner building, and I'd watched this man. He was a member of the stake presidency. He was a lawyer, so he had plenty of money. But I just see him hit the vending machines. I thought, to get something, because, you're spending a lot of time there, so you need to manage your energy and your blood sugar and your appetite. But I thought it was funny, like, if you're to go to Costco or Sam's Club or even just your normal grocery store, supermarket, buy a bulk case of granola bars, that's going to be cheaper. But apparently he had money to burn. But it's like, no, you sit there, you're going to save a lot of money. You save things in the margins. Saving 5 cents is how you do money. You really pinch pennies, buying a used book rather than a new one, going to the library rather than buying a used book. This builds up cumulatively over time, line upon line, precept upon precept. Small and simple things lead to great things. So I recommend the baby steps. For investing, that once you pay off your debt, I recommend The Motley Fool as a website, NerdWallet. And then you have this one, it's called investor.gov, where they have some calculators and some reminders for once you start retiring, collecting Social Security. And you find some other ones. Well, I got to pause this for a moment. I'm back now. So, investing. So for me, three steps. Here's your 3 pointers on money. You get on a budget. There's plenty of sample budgets on the internet. Get on a budget. Second thing is get out of debt, and then you don't do drugs. They've called back again. I hope with these interruptions, the phone call, what have you, I want it conveys authenticity. I'm not doing a slick production. I don't have a theme song. I don't have T-shirts or bobbleheads. It's just you, me, and the truth. So for me, get on a budget, get out of debt, and don't do drugs. Now, by getting on a budget, you track where your money's going. And that's the thing, is some people it's a control issue. They want to give onto their wild animalistic impulses. And that's probably the bigger issue. That's why you have religion, the natural man. Get out of debt. Once you get out of debt, it takes about 3 to 5 years. Once you get out of debt, you'll never go back into it, barring a medical emergency. You'll have so much freedom. Just the money just keeps piling up and up and up. I was able to have a hernia operation, have a toe amputated, and I was able to go through my recent medical challenge where I was using hyperbaric treatment, and I was able to pay for it all out of pocket. I was not going into any debt. You want to feel that. You want to feel that comfortable. You want to make sure that calm and collected and that secure where you're not worrying about stuff. Get out of debt. And there's ways to do it. It's called a debt snowball, and Dave Ramsey is very good about it. So, right now, this is where I am right now. So this is the setup I'm using, is that I like credit unions. They tend to have better rates than banks. This whole thing that, like, when you travel to other states, other countries, they're all interconnected. Of course, you're going to have to pay fees with ATMs, but you use as cash anymore. Everyone's using their debit cards or their phones to pay for stuff. And so, credit unions, just no problems. They tend to have better interest rates. So I set up, I have my checking account, and that's where the immediate flow of money, where you pay your immediate bills, grocery, movies, if there's any good movies out there, utilities. And then for when I save up money for rent or for utilities, and when you get your paycheck, you don't pay your utilities at the time. So I put all this money into my checking account. And what the stuff I use for a savings account, for formal savings, I stick into a money market account. Now, a money market account is just a high interest savings account. Now, you have to check the rules of your institution, but the one where the credit union I use, they have unlimited withdrawals. So I can put money in there, pull it out when I need it in case an emergency thing is. So the thing in your money market account is your 3 to 6 months emergency fund. So once you track how much you're spending each month, and sometimes actually some of the banks or credit cards, they actually track that for you, and they're very good about it. This isn't the 1980s where you're swiping the credit card and you have that paper thing. This is they're very good about helping you manage your money. These are not Mr. Burns evil people. So checking account, savings account, then money market account. Money market account is where you put your emergency fund, and get up to whatever is appropriate for you. It has a higher interest rate. That's why you leave it in there. To start investing, I'd recommend this, certificates of deposit. And what happens is that investing can be scary. You want to incrementally go, take a bunch of baby steps, line upon line, do this where you feel comfortable and you're not scared by this. I recommend getting a 12-month certificate of deposit, or the credit union I use calls them savings certificates. Get a 12-month one and just try it out for a year. So whatever the minimum amount is, this idea is sort of a Christmas club, where what you do is in December, you put a bunch of money in there, it cooks for an entire year, and so you have all this money plus all this interest from that. You put it in there and just watch it for a year. And what happens is a safe investment. You lose it only if the bank goes out of it, and if the credit union goes out of business, and that's just not going to happen. Try and see how you feel. For federal savings bond, the classic double E's, I have a few of those. It's mostly for patriotic reasons. It's a sure thing, but that's not where the wealth is going to come from. So as you're starting with bonds, you feel safe about it. Safe about using your money. You do that. You can get better rates with credit unions with your money, and put your money to better use. For stocks, index funds over individual stocks. I'm not a day trader. I invest for the long time, so I put a bunch of money into the index funds and use the reinvestment You just leave it in there and cook till your retirement. This is an analogy. You're setting up a bunch of crock pots. You're going to have this big barbecue when you retire. And so you're putting all these crock pots there and getting the stuff cooking for this long-term cooking. And I was recommend the same thing with an index fund. If you're nervous or cautious, invest like buy one share of it and let it sit there for 6 months or a year. And after about a year or 6 months, just watch what it's doing. Say, okay, I feel safe and confident about this. Just some other advice with investing in stocks: index funds, diversify, invest in the future, don't invest in the past. So what are we 20 years from now? What things are we going to need? And vote with common sense ones. Campbell soup. You feel comfortable. You eat Campbell soups each day. That's good. Now, I did have a bit of a problem. Is I own stock in both General Mill and Kellogg's. Those are the companies I grew up eating their cereal. And what happens is Kellogg's got bought out by this other company, so they took the stock off it, and it had what was called a cash call. So they asked for $38, so I had to pay $38 since I was a shareholder, and then they sold the stock, and so the money kind of disappeared. But it was a good, from the information I had, it was a good investment because Kellogg's is a brand you trust. You go to the store, there's still Kellogg's in there, still General Mills. It's just that I lost the stock there, and I actually like the balance. Same thing with like when you invest. This isn't rooting for your football team. You invest in Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, Fizz, which is Shasta, and you play the field with it. And so you're just constantly winning. Crypto. Crypto, that's where I put the ashtray money in. That's an old expression. When you have cars with ashtrays and cigarette lighters, people just throw quarters and nickels and dimes in there to pay the parking meters, just sort of your spare change. Now, that's not investing in it. It's the index fund is where you want to put your money. Credit cards. Dave Ramsey is all for cutting them up. He does not recommend them because a debit card can do what a credit card does. Don't pay off your credit card every month. Pay off your credit card every day. You can do that online now. And after paying off your debt, you'll be disciplined. You'll have the transformation you need to be able to manage this. Because one thing that a credit card does that a debit card doesn't do is give you points. Take the points and you can buy Christmas presents at the end of the year. If you have issues with that, if you have compulsions or your psychology is different, you can stick with debit cards or cash only. The cash envelope system is another common one. But I'm talking about these things. If I'd done these things, 20, 30 years ago, I'd be in a much better position than I am right now. And I don't want you to suffer. I want you to be prosperous. And it's not just me. These are things that experts who have a lot more money recommend. So 47 minutes, and that's the passing scene, seen with the eyes of faith, and life some pointers. Thank you.